This has actually been like eye-opening just to even look at them.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot that I can tell you about them that you wouldn't even understand to look for without it. So I think it would be fun.
Yeah.
People have a lot of like preconceived misconceptions about single bevel knives and how they're constructed and why things are done the way that they're done. And so it's tricky, you know. Like initially, everyone was buying all these radius platens and thinking you just like stick it against that and that's how you do the backside.
That's what everyone says, and
but it's not that, and you can see that it's not that when you look at them. So like for example, the red-handled one.
This one.
Yeah, the sharpener that does that, he has like what he'll call a fry pan style. So if you put this here, you'll see that it gets like shallow towards the ends, and then like the bottom part's pretty flat in the center.
That's super shallow.
Right, so it's like, but it comes like this.
But like, why? Is that something you would notice as you're cutting, or is that just the way they do it?
So he does that because he feels like it gives greater longevity to the knife in terms of how long the uraski lasts. And does a little bit better job at releasing stuff without creating air pockets that create suction. So like the deeper ones, like the fancy Damascus one is pretty deep. That one's gonna have a little bit more sticking going on the backside because you get like the air pocket suction. So there's that balance between like having enough hollow ground so it's not exerting pressure, but not so much that it creates suction. And then the super shiny solid one, that one is done by Ino-san, right? And he does like more of a sloped kind of thing. So it starts off like a little bit deeper and then turns into like a more shallow curve, but it's done in like 3 different stages.
It's like a compound.
Yeah, so all of them are compound. There's not one that you'll see where a dude just like sticks it down. It never happens that way.
And yet like all the guys in the States are doing that.
Man, there's so much stupid shit that happens because of A, not speaking the same language,
right.
B, thinking that you know enough of the language to be able to speak it effectively, or C, relying on translators that don't understand technical words.
Yeah.
So like I was just in Echizen, hanging out with Kato-san, and I was making some knives with him and whatever, and he was telling me, he's like, a lot of people come for the knife making classes now to make knives together with us. You know, when it's Americans or like Westerners, they have a translator that they hire, but like the translator doesn't know our vocabulary, doesn't know the words for like periodization, annealing, tempering, quenching. You know, some of them, but not all of them, doesn't understand the meaning. So a lot of stuff ends up getting either simplified, misconstrued, or lost in translation. And then additionally, when people go into workshops and just watch from afar or even up close and they see what's going on, they don't really understand because there's so many like subtle movements that we all do.
Yeah.
Right? Like finger placement, pressure, angle control. So like when you look from the side, you're like, oh, it's simple, you just do this. But the reality is that it's not, none of this stuff is simple.
When I was teaching my apprentice how to do that stuff, I ran into that all the time. Like in my head, I knew what I was doing, but trying to translate in words, like, what am I doing?
And when they watch you, the movements are so subtle that it's really hard to get a sense of stuff. So I see a lot of that kind of shit happen. I see a lot of like stupid lost in translation stuff.
I feel like a lot of people will just make assumptions too. They're like, oh, it's hollow, so it must be a simple radius.
Well, and they see the people working on the grinding wheels and they're like, oh, well, that's how they must do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's, catch you later, hero. It's part of the process. You need, you know, something that has that kind of radius to it, but you know, the radius changes depending on how much of the stone is used, what like wear level it's at. And so you can't just rely on that for that to be accurate. You have to think about like what overall design you're going for and how best to achieve it. And so generally speaking, you'll see that all of these guys do pretty compound bevels. And this one is...
I can't even like wrap my head around how you do that consistently.
The same way you do your stuff is you just do it so much.
Huh.
So like usually when... Let me go grab my notebook on this stuff because I have really clear specific notes on it. So like the first thing that they'll do is they'll grind kind of towards the center part of the ura, trying to clean off all the scale and create like a general depth. And then they'll work the front part near to the edge, the back part near to the spine, and then once again the center part. And it depends a little bit from like craftsman to craftsman, but that's usually the process you'll see. So like the whole process, for example, the first thing that they're doing from the rough forged blade is first starting the rough grinding on the front to create the shinogi line beginnings of it, and make sure that the core steel is exposed along the edge. Then a basic cleanup of the backside. then starting to blend the front two bevels longitudinally together. So like they'll grind in parts, upper section and lower section, and start to blend those things together. Then they'll do all that ura work, so like the front part of the ura, the back part of the ura, and then the center part, and then blend those things together as well, achieving whatever style of shape it is they're looking for. Yeah, and then lots of straightening, and then a lot of finishing work and whatnot.
Are they just blending them on the rotating stones, or like by hand? Or?
No, on the rotating stones, but the thing is that this is, most of the places aren't doing any kind of final sharpening, right? So it's about getting the blade to like the general shape. But here, people do a really different style of work. So when you are doing your grinding, you're going for like a finished, complete, smooth edge that people can easily sand and maintain stuff.
Yeah.
They get like the shinogi line the way they want, the edge thickness the way they want, the back geometry the way they want. But like the bevel itself, you know, that part's going to be sharpened by someone, so they don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. They can do that work upon request, but it's not stuff that's done initially, usually.
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason that like the micro bevel is such a large part of what they do.
And
But that also varies from craftsman to craftsman and region to region. Like the taper you'll see on that is going to be different from the taper you'll see on these other three.
Yeah, this one was very different and like so much thinner than I would normally expect from.
Yeah, and so part of that is the kind of stock that's available of this kind of material tends to be on the thinner side of stuff, so they're limited in that regard. But also, it's not a major knife making area for this kind of knife. You know, most Yanagiba come from Sahai. And so the craftsmen in other areas, because they're not making them as often, don't have the same kind of experience or ideas in mind when they make them.
Right. The thicknesses are like all fairly different too.
Depends on the blacksmith. More than almost anything else. You would think that like the sharpener has the most control over it, but they tend to not remove as much metal as you might think. And it's because the more metal that they start removing, the greater chance they have of blasting through the soft metal into the hard metal or vice versa. And also the greater warping that they're going to see as they do stuff. Right?
Yeah.
And so like straightening is done constantly throughout the blade making process, but it's done in different ways depending on how far you are through the process. So like in the beginning you can do it with like a chisel hammer, but later on you have to move to like a mallet or a wooden stick because you're already getting towards like the finishing side of stuff.
Yeah.
So for example, like this one is from Tanaka-san's workshop, and that closest to me, this is from Chiaki-san's workshop, from Nakagawa-san, and this one is from Yoshikazu Keira-san. So.
Man, when I was working in the mine yesterday, it was just warping every single pass I took.
Yeah, it does that. So like what people are trying to do is they'll do like all their forging and then rough grinding before heat treatment, not to get the edge so thin, but to get like general thickness to where you want it to be and the beginnings of the ura being formed, so that by the time that you're grinding, you don't have to remove as much metal and you can minimize the kind of warping you're doing. But even then, learning how to straighten in the way that these guys are doing, so like using chisel hammers specifically is like a game changer. So for example, if stuff is warped this way, I can hit on this side with the chisel hammer like this and cause the metal to expand back that way. And I can deal with twists in the same kind of way. So like straightening is the simple part, right? But like the rotational stuff, that's the shit that's crazy. And if you try and apply pressure torquing it this way, you end up with a lot of stuff that chips or breaks, especially the single bevel knives because of how thin they get at the edge.
Yeah.
But if you have a chisel hammer, you can fix that kind of stuff in a somewhat more delicate way. It just requires refinishing when you're done.
Yeah, I was noticing when I was grinding on the ura side or the other side, like whichever side it's
a flat knife?
No,
solid steel.
It's a solid steel. It has a hamon though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes it tricky. So like with the honyaki knives, a lot of times when there's the hamon, they'll torch where, you know, like the hamon only goes like 2/3 of the blade. They'll torch the spine along that last little bit also, just to make that part a little bit more flexible for like bending and straightening.
Yeah.
Just along the spine a little bit.
Right.
So you'll see that kind of thing often, especially when the knives are not ground yet. You can see like discoloration from being torched in that area and softened up a little bit.
So then they can straighten it later on easier.
Yeah. And then a lot of the straightening is done from like the area above the hamon. So like when the hamon is really near to the spine, that's the trickier one to straighten. When it's really close to the edge, that's the easier one to straighten, but you lose a lot of functional life of the knife.
Then it's a compromise.
Yeah, so that's why you'll see a lot of people do it right around the shinogi line or just above it.
I'm gonna show you the one I was working on.
Yeah.
So So this is the one I was working on yesterday. And it is just a simple radius because I was just trying to like at least hit the fundamental like almost the geometry that I was trying to get to. And there's still a lot to do, a lot of trimming and stuff like that. And I was getting it almost straight until I started like finalizing it, and then as I was finalizing it.
So you got the bend that starts like here to here, and apex is like right around there, right?
Right. So it was straight until I started grinding this.
Oh, but your hamon is super low, so that's kind of easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Honyaki straightening though, it scares the fuck out. I hate doing it because like it's gonna like snap. Like you know it's gonna snap.
I was so scared.
But the chisel hammers make it a lot easier to do this kind of stuff.
And then the other difficult part was
I should continue past this so you don't have a plunge line over there. Just like kind of work up slowly because the plunge lines end up being like weird later on for sharpening unless your fit up leads right up into that exactly.
Yeah, so I was thinking of just cutting the shoulder all the way and then the handle would start like somewhere around here.
Yeah.
Maybe further back. But I was trying to get the ura like tight along the edge of the profile. It's so hard.
Well, that's why that compound thing makes it a lot easier to do. So like when you're a little bit steeper, kind of closer to the edge, it's a lot easier to do that kind of stuff and you have a little bit more shallow thing in the center.
That makes sense.
But the amount of straightening that you need to do throughout your entire process is probably significantly more than you're doing right now. So like literally it's like grind a little bit, straighten. Grind a little bit, straighten.
Yeah.
You're straightening like literally all of the time.
Yeah.
Every like, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. Like you know, usually people aren't working on one blade, so they'll do like batches, do a bunch of grinding, then straighten all of them, then move on to the next step, straighten all of them.
Yeah, so what I noticed with this was any side I would grind on, it would warp towards that side. So I was just like, well, if I just grind and try to balance it on, then the end result gets straight.
Yeah, but then you're grinding, then you're messing up other parts of the grind by doing that.
Right.
So instead of, straightening through grinding, you can straighten through like hammering. Or, I mean, with Honyaki, you can't really like apply torque to it in the same way because it will snap. And then the thickness is also pretty thick.
Yeah.
So this is what, 300 millimeters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure like the range of thicknesses that is like common.
It's a pretty standard range. So like this is the thickest that I think is really okay.
Okay.
This is thinner than what I would normally go for. This is like usually a thin one for me.
Right.
But again, there's regional differences. So like Niigata, for example, Shigefusa knives, they get pretty thin as the Yanagiba goes.
Taro let me one, I forget which one it was. It was about the same thickness as this.
Yeah.
A little bit thicker towards
this feels thick to me.
Yeah.
And also because of that, there's a lot of like heft to it. And then it looks like the convexing is a little bit too pronounced on the bevel side of stuff.
Yeah.
So like when I'm doing hamaguri, I want it to look flat, even though it's not flat. And so it ends up being like a 2-part compound bevel where I do first the shinogi line and then I place pressure at the edge. But the angle is not changing significantly between them. It's predominantly from where my pressure is being placed. So when it's something that's so convex like this, A, it's tricky for people to do on stones.
Right.
And then B, you end up with a lot of pressure being exerted against food in that way because of how convex it is. Yeah. So it's slightly flatter, I think, could also be helpful.
So thinner, flatter overall.
Yeah. Let me go see if I have one that I sharpened so you can see like what the end result looks like of hamaguri and how much curvature there is and stuff. So you see kind of what I mean with respect to that?
Yeah.
So like it is convex, but it's not extremely convex. It's subtly convex.
Yeah.
And that's really all that you need. There's like 2 or 3 main reasons that we do it, but one of the most important things is that it gives us independent control over the edge and the shinogi line, right? So like when they're tied together, when it's like a totally flat grind, if you fuck up the edge, you fuck up the shinogi line, right? Or vice versa. So this way we have totally independent control over those 2 things. It increases toughness at the edge, but we don't need a huge increase in toughness because the huge increase in toughness, like how convex yours is, creates a different kind of cutting feel. The cutting experience isn't quite as sharp or keen. But so something that's slightly more tough and durable, and then helping out with food release a little bit.
This has been very like humbling to learn all this kind of stuff.
I don't know about humbling. Like, you make fucking cool stuff. Just that I see like a different side of it than most, and I've kind of stayed away from the American custom stuff a little bit because I think philosophically like it doesn't mesh as well with what I'm into. Like there's things that I think cut really well. But then there's a lot of time that's spent on like making shit look really pretty, and there's sacrifices that come along with that with respect to like weight and balance and care and maintenance and not being able to do like easy maintenance for stuff because handles are epoxied on, or that they stay slippery because they're a specific kind of like stabilized material. And then the heat treatment philosophy is also really different. So like people here shoot for like maximums of things. They're like, how fine can we get the carbides? How hard can we get the steel? Where can we push? And so like the thought process behind balance overall seems to kind of take a back seat to that. Yeah. Like maybe you don't push as hard, but you're shooting for a specific kind of like tactile feeling and sharpening, or a specific kind of edge feel. Yeah. And there are some people that are doing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely noticed, and I don't know, especially doing this stuff, I want to make sure I do like something that's properly done.
Yeah.
So like
have you not had a chance to like go and hold a bunch of different Yanagiba?
Not that many.
Phoenix Night House isn't far from you, right? Corey's like a pretty chill dude.
Yeah. I've held a few of Taros, and
but Taro also goes for like obscure stuff, right? So it's like you're not gonna ever pick up like, oh, this is just a normal fucking Yanagiba from him, because it's like it's not like that's not his channel, you know? Like for him, it's this whole kind of passion that ties everything together with the art and craftsmanship and artistry and aesthetic and the relationships, and that stuff matters to him more than the knife itself is going to matter, because he has technique down, so he can do whatever with anything and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
I mean, it matters to an extent, but like it's not as much of an issue as like someone learning about something for the first time, or that doesn't have as much experience with stuff. It works differently. I own like over 50 on Yanagiba now.
Personally?
Yeah. Dang. It's stupid. Like it doesn't even make sense. No, it's just like it's gotten to a point that it's just ridiculous.
Wow.
And like not by chance. Like I bought 30 of them.
Right.
And the rest have just kind of like accumulated. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I made like 2 Yanagiba this year, you know, like myself. Or someone will be like, oh, test out this new thing. I changed the way I did this thing. I want you to see how it is. You know? And I just like it piles up.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually have a younger craftsman that's just getting started on learning stuff. If you want to see kind of something that's from someone like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right at my desk.